My friends, it is such an honor and a joy to be back here with you all as a part of this series. I'm so grateful to my dear friends Amber and Scott for making this happen, and for Heidi Rupke, who has been so indulgent of me in this preparation process. We don't always applaud in church, but if you knew what Heidi has done to make all of this happen, can we applaud for her quick? Can we give some love and appreciation for just the heroic work that she does here. I love preaching this series, and I love coming and listening. Preaching, as an art form is so important to me. And I think a lot about how most people only ever hear preaching from one person, right? And most preachers only ever hear preaching from themselves, which feels so limiting. So it's just amazing that every year during Lent, Memphis just gets this feast of different preachers, and this is such an amazing thing that Calvary does for this city. So thank you so much for that. I feel like I am a different minister every time I come here. I become a different minister. And part of ministry, right, is just letting yourself be open to these moments in your life, right, that change who you are as a minister, and being willing to find those moments in unexpected places. The most recent time this happened to me was when I saw the band Kiss in concert. Do you guys remember Kiss? If you're not familiar, Kiss is a glam rock band who were like a really big deal in the 70s. They perform in a lot of makeup and costumes and platform heels, and it's this big, crazy thing. It's not normally the kind of thing that I would go see, but this is supposedly their last tour, and they're this big part of American pop culture. And I thought, well, why not just for the history, right? Someday I'd like to be able to tell my grandchildren that I saw Kiss. And so Christopher, who's sitting right there, and we went to this concert, and Kiss came out on stage, and the whole FedEx Forum went nuts, because apparently Kiss are still a big deal to a lot of people. And the singer, Paul Stanley, gave this amazing opening monologue. Paul Stanley talks like a cartoon witch, right? And so he walks in and goes, "Hello, Memphis. The first time Kiss played Memphis was Lafayette's Ballroom in 1974, and we've loved you ever since. Are you ready to rock and roll?" And I thought, oh, I'm as ready as I'll ever be. But the show was pretty amazing. There was lasers and pyrotechnics and mechanical lift and a CGI dragon, and I think at some point there was music. It's a Kiss concert, right? That's like super not the point. But at the very end of the show, after the final song in the encore, something truly amazing happened. Paul Stanley grabbed the mic just before he walked off stage, and he said, the usual rock star stuff, "We love you, Memphis, rock and roll." And then just before he left, he said the most beautifully self-aware thing that I have ever heard a performer say. He said, "Memphis, did you get what you came for?" And I was stunned. And I just sat there digesting this question. Did you get what you came for? For the rest of the night, I just kept repeating this question to myself. Did you get what you came for? Because as people of faith, this is a question that we don't ask nearly as often as we need to. We clergy folks, we like to sit around and talk about why people should come to our congregations, especially when they're not coming to our congregations. We talk about why they should come, but we don't spend nearly as much time talking about why people actually do come to our congregations. And I kept thinking about this question and thinking about this Bible story. This is one of my all-time favorites. I think it has so much to teach us about what people come to us for, even though you don't hear about this one a lot on Sunday mornings, because when we preach out of the Bible, we cut out all of the good parts. And this story, it's the story of the Witch of Endor. Does anybody know this story? Do we have any Witch of Endor fans in the building? All right, strap in. We're doing this. So King Saul is in trouble. He's about to go to war, and things are not looking good for him or the Israelites, and he is understandably, I think, very stressed out about it. But the prophet, who he normally would have consulted about his situation, the prophet Samuel, has just died. And so he tries to deal with his stress and his need for answers in other ways. He prays, he tries dream interpretation, he tries these ancient forms of divination, but nothing works for him. And so eventually he decides that he doesn't care if Samuel is dead. He has to talk to Samuel. He just has to. Nobody else could possibly know how to make him feel better. And so he decides he's going to do this by talking to a medium, right? Talking to somebody who can talk to the spirits of people who have died. But this is complicated because he has just banished all of the mediums from the land. So his men take him to see this medium, a woman who they call a witch living in a place called Endor. But they have to bring him in disguise, right? Because it's not a good look to be caught doing a thing that you yourself just made illegal. And so Saul shows up at the witch of Endor's house, and he asks her to bring back the ghost of the prophet Samuel so they can talk. And at first there's this really great moment where she's like, if I knew how to do that, which I'm not necessarily saying I do, that would be illegal, sir. And he says, yeah, trust me, you're fine. King Saul is not going to get us in trouble. And so the witch of Endor does it. She calls up Samuel's ghost. She would have done this by spreading milk and honey on the ground to tempt him up. This is how it was believed you enticed someone out of the spirit world, was with food. And so Samuel's ghost appears. And this is interesting because this is the only time we see a ghost in the Bible, right? In other places, we have people coming back from the dead, and we have people speaking from the other side. But in the whole book, this is the only ghost. And so Saul and Samuel talk, and Samuel doesn't tell him anything he doesn't know. And this is important to remember, right? Everything that Samuel says is something that he had already said before he died. And Samuel says, basically, listen, when I was alive, I told you what you needed to do if you wanted to avoid this situation, and you didn't do it. So here we are, and you're out of luck. And Saul despairs. And part of me thinks, oh, that's just so typical, right? Leave it to a panicked politician to walk into a religious space at the last minute and ask a religious leader, can you please make the words of this prophet say something that will justify my bad decisions? Right? And then get all bent out of shape when it turns out that just isn't possible. But the story doesn't end there. Before Saul and his men leave, the witch tells Saul that he needs to eat. Saul, it turns out, in all of the stress of his current dilemma, hasn't eaten or slept for some time. And so the witch of Endor and Saul's men sit him down and they convince him to eat and to rest, and he does. And then she sends him on his way. So, did Saul get what he came for? I love this story because to me this story is such a beautiful demonstration of what religious community is and can be, and what people come to us for, because that's sort of the big question for religious communities right now, isn't it? Right? Because the world has changed, right? Because people don't have to come to church anymore, right? The societal expectations about, you really have to go to church somewhere. Those aren't what they were, especially where I'm from in the godless North. But even in the South, this is changing. Plenty of people just don't go, and even people who do go don't go all the time. So when people show up in our churches or our synagogues or our mosques, they're not there just like 'cause. People show up for a reason. Saul shows up in that religious space feeling heartbroken and panicked. He shows up desperately trying to find hope and carrying in him a sinking suspicion that maybe there just isn't any hope to be had. This is a story that I think about all the time when I think about ministry to people who are hurting and what to do with people who are hurting in the pews, and there is always hurting people in the pews. The great Unitarian Universalist minister Frank Schulman wrote, "Never forget that every Sunday there is somebody in your pews with a broken heart." I mean, look, it's 2019, right? We live in a truly monstrous time. Frank Schulman talks about remembering the person in the pews with a broken heart. These days, you may have to look harder to find somebody in the pews whose heart is still intact. This is an era that is so traumatic. Regularly, almost daily, there is violence being done to human beings, and there is violence being done to human goodness. So often, I stumble into my church and I feel like Saul. I feel heartbroken and hopeless about the state of the world. Anybody else? This is an experience that a lot of people have. And I think this is the moment when religious organizations, when people of faith, this is the moment when our work is hard. Our path is hard, but our path is also very clear. It is on all of us people of faith, to minister to the broken and hurting people of this world. To minister to all the broken and hurting people of this world, to honestly name and process the hurt that is happening around us. And when I say all, I mean all. The people who need and deserve our ministry absolutely includes the people who we believe are responsible for the hurt of our time. I was talking this past weekend with some colleagues of mine, a bunch of, liberal ministers hanging out. And we were complaining about Donald Trump, because that's what liberal ministers do when we get together. We complain about Donald Trump. And we were talking about this question that liberal clergy love to ask each other. What if Donald Trump walked into your church? What would you do? Would you be able to love him in the way that your faith calls you to? And, I think this is an interesting question. And a colleague of mine, the Reverend Sarah Napoleon, said, no, that's a stupid and lazy question, because Donald Trump probably isn't going to walk into your church. But the people who voted for him probably are, if they haven't already. So don't worry about whether you could be in beloved community with him. Worry about whether you could be in beloved community with them. Remember what Samuel said to Saul? Saul got himself into that situation. Saul got all of them into that situation, and everybody in the story is super real with him about how they feel about his choices and what the consequences of those choices were. And then, what did they do? Anyone? They feed him. Then they love him. Then they comfort him and lift him up, because he is a person who is deserving of love and grace, as are we all. And so when people of faith are trying to deal with the people who we feel are like Saul, when they show up in our religious communities in search of answers, our duty is to give them what they came for. Truth and prophecy that is uncompromising, yes, but also love, also kindness, also whatever kind of food they require. I can stand here and tell you truthfully that as a person of faith living through this time, I am deeply saddened and disturbed by the hateful rhetoric that I hear coming from our country's leadership and from our media and from faith leaders on what I perceive to be the religious right. But I also have to tell you, I am very disturbed by what I hear coming from my friends and colleagues on the left. I'm talking about the attacking, the demonizing that we seem to have decided that we are entitled to do towards those who we seem to have decided are our enemies, and to the people with whom we disagree within our own religious communities, and to the people who didn't phrase that thing quite the right way. Our job, as the prophet Samuel teaches us, is to be honest about hard truth. But as the witch of Endor teaches us, that truth-telling must also be followed by love and care that is genuine. The witch of Endor, who, remember, is somebody who Saul had banished, right? Somebody who Saul had treated horribly like 10 minutes ago. Still, what she communicates to him about religious community is clear. No matter how mad I am at you, no matter how deeply I disagree with the choices you have made, you will never be unwelcome here. This combination of unconditional honesty and challenge and unconditional love is something that people have the right to expect from us. It is our job to give this to people. It is no longer enough for us just to exist. Now we have work to do. And if we want our religious institutions to mean something, to be relevant in the 21st century, we must put all of ourselves into this work of challenge and love. And if you truly feel like you can't do both, then just pick the love. It is 2019, people. The world is more than challenging enough. I want to tell you this one last story. Christopher and I were when we first took our seats at the Kiss concert. It's okay, we're back at the Kiss concert now. We can breathe. We're chatting a bit with the guy sitting next to us, and Christopher went ahead and mentioned that I am his minister, right? And I just, without even thinking about it, I just gave him this death glare. Right? And he said, yeah, he's my minister. And I'm like, dude, we're at a rock and roll concert. Now nobody will think I'm cool. But the guy next to us, he smiled and he says, don't worry, I go to church, but it's a progressive church. You're with friends here. And I said, oh, okay, great. I'm actually a Unitarian Universalist minister. And his smile vanished real quick. And it came out pretty quickly that when he and I say progressive church, we mean very different things. Right? Like when I say progressive church, I mean open and affirming and involved in social justice work. And when he says progressive church, he means that on Sundays, sometimes you can wear jeans. And so he and I got pretty frosty towards each other pretty quick. Right? Like, I did exactly the thing that I have just spent this whole sermon trying to get you to not do, because I struggle to be my best and most faithful self, just like everybody else. And so, like, he and I, we still cheered and sang along with Kiss, but, like, we did it more, like, next to each other instead of, like, with each other. But then at the very end of the concert, when everything had reached its thundering crescendo, the guy next to us was standing up and jumping up and down and shouting, and, I love you, Kiss! I want to rock and roll all night and party every day! And Paul Stanley, Memphis, did you get what you came for? And the guy's jumping up and down going, yes! Yes, I did! And I thought, no religious institution that I have ever been a part of has ever given anybody what they came for to the extent that this guy just got what he came for from Kiss. And then I thought, yeah, I did too. Both of us got what we came for. Both of us deserve the same things. We find them in different places, but both of us deserve to be told that we are loved. Both of us deserve to feel valued, affirmed, walk out knowing that we are blessed, that we are whole. Amen.